My future in-laws handed me a prenup and said I was worthless, that I brought absolutely nothing to their son's life. They wanted me to sign away any right to their family fortune because I was just a poor elementary school teacher. What they didn't know, I own the mortgage to their multi-million-dollar mansion, and I was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives.
Here's what happened.
The conference room felt cold despite the summer heat outside. I sat across from Richard and Patricia, my fiancé, Derek's parents, in their Connecticut waterfront home. The leather chair beneath me probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the crystal chandelier above us sparkled like it was mocking my presence. Patricia slid the document toward me with perfectly manicured nails, her expression a mixture of pity and condescension that made my stomach turn. "We need you to sign this before the wedding, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm sure you understand. Derek is our only child, and we've spent decades building what we have. We simply cannot risk it." Derek sat beside his parents, looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. That silence hurt more than anything his mother could say. We'd been together for almost 3 years. He'd proposed on a sunset cruise in the Caribbean. We'd picked out flowers and a venue. We talked about children and growing old together. And now, he couldn't even meet my eyes while his parents treated me like a con artist. Richard leaned forward, his expensive suit rustling. "Let's be frank, Emily. You work at an elementary school making what, $50,000 a year? You rent a 1-bedroom apartment. You don't come from money. Derek, on the other hand, stands to inherit Wellington Enterprises, this property, and significant investment accounts. We're talking about protecting over $100 million in assets. You can see why we need assurances." I looked down at the prenuptial agreement. My attorney, Sandra Kim, sat quietly beside me. She'd reviewed this document 3 days ago and called me immediately, her voice filled with disbelief. 27 pages that essentially declared me a financial parasite. No claim to anything acquired during the marriage. No spousal support regardless of circumstances. If Derek and I had children and divorced, I get minimal child support and nothing else. It was designed to make sure I left the marriage exactly as I entered it, with nothing. "You do understand, don't you, dear?" Patricia continued. "We're not saying you're a bad person. You're clearly sweet, and Derek is fond of you. But the reality is that you're marrying into a different world. This agreement simply acknowledges that reality." Sandra cleared her throat. "My client would like a few minutes to discuss this privately." Richard frowned. "Is that really necessary? It's straightforward. She signs, we move forward with wedding plans. We're paying for everything, after all. The venue, the catering, the flowers, everything. But we need this signed first. Mr. Wellington, Emily is entitled to legal counsel before signing any contract," Sandra said firmly.
Fini.
10 minutes. Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. "We'll be in the sunroom." The 3 of them left, Derek trailing behind his parents like a scolded child. When the door closed, Sandra turned to me with barely contained frustration. "Emily, this is one of the worst prenups I've seen in my career. You'd be signing away rights that most states would grant you automatically. Are you really considering this?" "I want to see how this plays out," I said quietly. Sandra studied my face. "You're not going to tell them, are you?" "Not yet." She shook her head, a slight smile forming. "Your call, but I want front row seats when the truth comes out." The Wellingtons returned exactly 10 minutes later. Patricia carried a tray with coffee and pastries, as if this were a pleasant brunch rather than a financial shakedown. Richard settled back into his chair with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. "Have you reached a decision?" he asked. "I have some questions first," I said calmly. "Of course," Patricia said with practiced patience. "This document states I have no claim to this property, correct?" "Correct," Richard confirmed. "This home is worth approximately $4.8 million. It's been in our family for 25 years. We can't risk losing it in a potential divorce." "And Wellington Enterprises?" "Derek's future inheritance." "Protected completely," Richard said. "The company is valued at roughly $93 million. Derek will inherit it, and it will remain his sole property regardless of his marital status." What about the investment portfolio mentioned in Section 9? Patricia smiled. That's our retirement fund. About $14 million in various holdings. We've worked very hard for that security, Emily. Surely you can understand why we need to protect it. I do understand, I said. One more question. If your financial situation were to change unexpectedly, would this agreement change? Richard actually laughed. Change? The Wellingtons have been financially stable for generations. We don't face financial difficulties. But hypothetically, if circumstances shifted, would the prenup be modified? The agreement is binding under all circumstances, Richard said firmly. That's the entire point. You sign it, you're bound by its terms permanently. I looked at Derek, who was studying the floor like it contained the secrets of the universe. Derek, is this really what you want? He finally looked up, his expression conflicted. I love you, but they're my parents. If we don't do this, they'll cut me off. No job at the company, no apartment, nothing. I can't afford to lose everything. Lose everything, I repeated slowly. Tell me, what exactly is it that you'd be losing? His entire lifestyle, Patricia interjected. Derek works at Wellington Enterprises because we gave him that position. He lives in that downtown penthouse because we purchased it. His car, his club memberships, his connections, all provided by us. If he defies us on this matter, all of that disappears. I turned to Sandra. In your professional opinion, should I sign this agreement? Sandra's eyes gleamed. I think the Wellingtons should see your financial disclosure first. It's required as part of the prenuptial process anyway. Why would we need to see that? Richard frowned. We already know her financial situation. Do you? Sandra pulled a folder from her briefcase and placed a document on the table. This is Ms. Chen's current financial statement, prepared by her accounting firm last month. I believe you should review it before she signs anything. Patricia picked up the paper. Her face went completely white. This cannot possibly be accurate, she whispered. What does it say? Richard grabbed the document from her hands. His expression transformed from confident to confused to shocked in the span of seconds. This shows that Emily is worth $134 million. The room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique clock in the corner. What? Derek's voice cracked. There's obviously an error, Richard said, but his voice had lost all its authority. This shows ownership of something called Chun Capital Group. That's my private equity firm, I said calmly. I founded it 9 years ago after graduating from Columbia Business School. We specialize in acquiring and restructuring distressed assets. Columbia? Patricia repeated faintly. But you teach elementary school. I volunteer at the school I attended as a child, 3 mornings a week. I corrected gently. I teach reading to underprivileged students. It matters to me, but it's not my profession. Your profession is private equity, Richard said slowly, still staring at the financial statement. Yes. Chun Capital manages approximately $370 million in assets. My personal stake is worth about $134 million. We focus on undervalued real estate, distressed corporate debt, and mortgage note portfolios. Derek was staring at me like I was a stranger. Mortgage notes. Yes. 2 years ago, we acquired a portfolio of residential mortgages from a regional bank that was liquidating. Excellent terms, all performing loans, just undervalued in the secondary market. Sandra was smiling now. Mr. Wellington, if you turn to page 4, you'll see a detailed list of those mortgage holdings. Richard flipped pages with shaking hands. He stopped. All color drained from his face. What is it? Patricia leaned over to look. She gasped. One of these mortgages, Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper, is for 847 Harborview Drive. This address. That's correct. I confirmed. Your mortgage was part of that portfolio acquisition. I've held the note on this property for 26 months now. The silence was absolute. You own our mortgage? Patricia's voice was barely audible. Your original lender sold the mortgage to a larger institution, which bundled it with others and sold the package to my firm. So yes, you've been making your monthly payments to Chun Capital Group. You've been paying me for over 2 years. Derek looked like he might be sick. Why didn't you ever tell me? You never asked what I actually did, I said simply. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you'd smile and change the subject. You preferred thinking of me as a simple elementary school teacher. When we met at that charity event, you assumed I was there as a volunteer, not as a donor. I let you assume it because I wanted to know if you'd love me without the money. $134 million, he repeated, stunned. Give or take, depending on market conditions, I said. Richard had regained some composure, though his commanding tone was gone. Emily, Miss Chun, I apologize. We clearly made incorrect assumptions. You assumed that someone who volunteers with children and drives a 10-year-old Honda must be poor? I said. You decided that because I don't wear designer labels or name drop, I must have nothing. You concluded I was marrying up without ever asking about my life. Patricia had tears forming in her eyes. We were trying to protect our son. No, I said firmly. You were trying to protect your sense of superiority. You wanted me to sign a document declaring myself worthless so you could maintain your position above me. Sandra cleared her throat. For the record, my client's prenuptial proposal is also in this folder. She placed another document on the table. Richard opened it with trembling hands. He read for several minutes. This is remarkably fair. It's equitable, I corrected. All assets brought into the marriage remain separate property, mine and Derek's. Assets acquired during the marriage are divided based on contribution and circumstances. There are provisions for children for support if needed, for both parties' business interests to be protected. Both parties, Derek repeated. I don't have business interests. You own everything. You work for Wellington Enterprises, I pointed out. That's a business interest. And Derek, if we married, I plan to invest in expanding that business. I've analyzed your family's company. With proper capital injection and updated strategy, Wellington Enterprises could grow substantially. You're sitting on untapped potential because of overly conservative management. Richard was still reading my proposal. This section here indicates you're offering to invest $25 million in Wellington Enterprises. If we became family, I'd want to invest in family, I said. The investment would be structured as a business loan with fair terms, keeping ownership within your family while providing growth capital.
Why?
Patricia asked, her voice breaking. After everything we've said and done, why would you offer that? Because I love your son, I said simply. And because I believe in building people up, not tearing them down. Unlike you, I don't measure someone's value by their bank balance. Derek reached across the table for my hand.
I'm so sorry.
I should have asked more questions. I should have really listened when you talked about your work. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But you're young, and you were raised to value appearances over substance. You can change if you choose to. Can we start over? He asked. Can I get to know the real you? I looked at him carefully, trying to see past the shock to the man I'd fallen for. Do you love me because you thought I was someone who needed rescuing? Or do you love who I actually am? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I thought I knew you. Now I realize I didn't know anything real. That's honest, at least, I said. Patricia spoke up, her voice subdued. Emily, what happens now? With the mortgage? With the wedding? The mortgage continues normally, I said. Your payments are current and the terms are fair. As for the wedding, I looked at Derek. That depends on whether we can build an actual relationship based on truth instead of assumptions. And the prenup? Richard asked quietly. I stood, gathering my things. Keep both documents. Read them. Think about what they reveal about how we see each other. My version protects us both, while assuming we're partners building something together. Yours assumes I'm a threat to be neutralized. Richard stood as well.
We were wrong, Emily.
Completely wrong. We judged you based on superficial observations and our own biases. That was inexcusable. It was, I agreed. But Mr. Wellington, you should know something. I would have signed your prenup. Everyone stared at me, even knowing how one-sided it was.
Sandra asked.
Yes, because I don't need Derek's money. I never did. I was marrying him for love, not for access to the Wellington fortune. Your prenup would have protected me just as much as it protected you by proving my motives were pure. But you didn't sign it, Patricia observed. No, because you needed to understand that worth isn't measured in dollars. You needed to realize that the woman you were dismissing as a gold digger actually holds your financial security in her hands. You needed humility. Richard smiled slightly, a genuine expression. Message received. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Derek, you have my number. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about who we both really are and what we actually want, call me. Until then, the wedding is postponed. Wait. Derek started to stand.
No.
You've spent 3 years dating a version of me you created in your imagination. Take time to decide if you want to know the real me. That's going to require effort, genuine curiosity, and seeing me as an equal partner, not as a project. I left the Wellington estate, the estate whose mortgage I held, with Sandra beside me. That was incredible, Sandra said as we reached my car. Though I still think you should have mentioned the other properties. Other properties? Chun Capital holds mortgage notes on 4 other properties in this area, including one owned by Patricia's brother. You essentially own paper on half their social circle. I laughed. Let's save that information. They've had enough revelations for one day. What are you going to do about Derek? I unlocked my Audi, the one I usually parked several blocks from his apartment building. I'm going to wait and see if he's capable of growth. If he can see past his assumptions. And if he can't, then I'll move on. I'm not interested in being someone's charity project or arm candy. I want a partner who values who I actually am. My phone vibrated as I drove away. A text from Derek appeared on my screen. I'm an idiot. Can we really talk? Actually talk. I smiled and replied, tomorrow. The coffee shop on Riverside. 9 a.m. And Derek, come ready to ask questions about my real life, not the fantasy version you preferred. His response came immediately. I will, I promise. I'm sorry for not seeing you, for not asking, for being exactly what my parents trained me to be. Awareness is the first step, I typed back. See you tomorrow. I put my phone down and drove toward my actual home, a penthouse in the city with skyline views, a home office where I managed a multi-hundred-million-dollar firm while wearing comfortable clothes and volunteering at schools. They'd called me a gold digger who brought nothing. They hadn't realized I owned the gold mine. Maybe they'd learned something about judging people by appearances rather than character, about worth versus wealth, about the difference between having money and being valuable. Tomorrow, I discover if Derek had learned the same lesson. And if he hadn't, I'd be fine. I'd built an empire from nothing once. I could certainly find a partner who valued me for more than what they assumed I lacked. Either way, I'd be perfectly fine. I always had been. They just hadn't bothered to look closely enough to notice. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about how we judge others or how we value people in our own lives, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Hit that like button if you believe people should be valued for who they are, not what they have. And if you want more stories about truth, justice, and unexpected revelations, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, never judge a book by its cover, because you might just discover you've been underestimating the author all along.